As I found myself in southern Iraq floating on the Euphrates River, I realized that beyond being in the region of the Garden of Eden, I heard that I was also in Noah's neighborhood. As I opened my Bible to Genesis chapters 5 through 10, I discovered that there was no Bible GPS that would give me Noah's address. So I figured I would skip this episode. But then I heard about an ancient artifact discovered in biblical Iraq that may have come from Noah's diary. Is it possible that there are stories that are borrowed from ancient cultures and given a facelift in order to fit the biblical narrative? When it comes to the famous story of Noah and the ark, we are going to try to answer two crucial questions. Number one, who came first, Noah or a man named Utnapishtim? Question number two, did Moses plagiarize the story of Noah and the ark from an older source? I want to start by sharing a well-done 10-minute presentation about the discovery of what may be an actual ancient boat sitting high in the mountains of Turkey. This short piece, titled Myth or Reality, Hunting for the Real Noah's Ark, will set the stage for answering those two crucial questions I'm asking.
Uzungili, Turkey, 1959. Army Captain İlhan Durupinar flies an aerial reconnaissance mission for NATO.
Captain Durupinar is there to take photographs from his plane in order to map a remote area in the Turkish highlands. A few years prior, there had been 3 large earthquakes that altered the terrain, so the government wants updated images.
The flight is routine until he spots something strange.
He's flying over basically the middle of nowhere when he sees a startling and unusual formation amongst the rocks below, which of course, he photographs.
When the film is developed, the captain is surprised to see what appears to be the remains of a large ship, far inland and 6,500 feet above sea level.
What in the world would a boat be doing way up there? He doesn't know it yet, but he may just have stumbled onto the answer, some people think, of a great biblical mystery that has been out there for thousands of years.
The mystery of Noah's Ark.
The story of Noah's Ark is told in the biblical book of Genesis. After God creates the universe and mankind begins with Adam and Eve, they go on to populate the earth. 10 generations later, Noah's born.
According to Genesis, during Noah's time, God loses faith in humanity.
Humankind become evil and sinful. And God sees all this and is very, very displeased by it. And he essentially decides to sort of hit the reset button. He's going to wipe out all living things that he has created and start afresh.
God spares Noah and his family on one condition. He must build an ark and stock it with pairs of every animal on earth.
So the ark is a giant ship. It's designed to survive this cataclysmic flood that's about to cover the earth. God gives Noah extremely detailed instructions on how to build this ark, how many floors it should have, how many rooms, what type of wood to use, and even its exact dimensions: 515 feet long, 86 feet wide, and 51 feet tall.
According to the book of Genesis, the flood lasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Eventually, as the waters receded back into the earth, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat.
And actually, there is a mountain today called Mount Ararat. It's a huge peak in Turkey, and Durupinar's aerial photo is taken just a few miles south of them.
For centuries, religious scholars and historians view the story of the Great Flood as a metaphor, a warning that God punishes sin. But curiously, the flood is also mentioned in both the Torah and the Quran. Could these photos be proof that Noah's tale is, in fact, true?
Durupinar's photos create real kind of firestorm of controversy and excitement. People are super excited because if these photos actually show Noah's Ark, then they can prove that everything that's written in the Bible about this whole event is actually true, right? This is a historical event that actually happened.
See, there are two things researchers can look for. Now, the boat itself is one of them, but another avenue to explore is looking for evidence of a giant flood. Large-scale natural disasters leave traces behind that can last thousands of years. And interestingly enough, research has found that a massive flood may indeed have taken place, and it happened right near where Dorupinar's photograph was taken in Turkey.
In 1997, a team of geologists, geophysicists, and oceanographers, led by a couple of Americans, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, analyzed the area around the Black Sea. And they find evidence for what they call the Black Sea deluge.
And at the bottom of the saltwater Black Sea, they find remains of freshwater animals dating back to around 5,000 or 6,000 BC. And soil samples and bedrock tests also prove that this once was a freshwater lake, and then it changed very quickly.
So the theory runs that about 8,000 years ago, there was a huge glacier, and suddenly that glacier collapses. It causes this massive upsurge of the Mediterranean Sea that floods all the surrounding areas, including what's now the Black Sea.
Every day, the equivalent of 200 Niagara Falls worth of water floods in, and this goes on for 300 days straight. Madness. The existing freshwater lake that will become the Black Sea, it gets bigger and deeper at the rate of 1 mile a day. If you lived in this region, in just a matter of hours, your home could be at the bottom of the sea.
The flood was actually the size of Colorado before receding. It could have affected thousands upon thousands of people.
According to the study's authors, any survivors could possibly have passed the flood story down through the generations. In 1985, the long hunt for Noah's Ark takes a sudden turn when a 4,000-year-old clay tablet is discovered in the attic of a British Air Force veteran. It takes many years to translate, but some believe it could finally solve the mystery of where the Bible's great flood took place and where the Ark itself landed.
In the 1980s, in England, a man by the name of Leonard Simmons passes away. Simmons had led a really interesting life. So he had been a Royal Air Force officer, and as such, he traveled a lot around the world, around the Mediterranean basin, and he had collected on his travels a lot of different artifacts, which he brought back to England with him.
Simmons' son, Douglas, would like to know what some of these things are. So every so often, he'll take one and bring it to the British Museum. One day, in 1985, he arrives with a tiny clay tablet, maybe 4 inches high, not very big. It's covered, front and back, in cuneiform script, the writing of ancient Mesopotamia.
Simmons meets with Dr. Irvin Finkel, who is chief curator for Near Eastern artifacts at the British Museum. And when Finkel starts working with this text, he is apparently really amazed.
Finkel knows that every single scratch on this tablet is gold. His eyes scan the first line, and he's almost drowning in excitement at this point. Because here in this tiny tablet is an account of a devastating flood.
Finkel asks Simmons if he can keep the tablet to fully translate it, but Simmons declines.
Finkel really wants a crack at this tablet because he's devoted his life to the study of these cuneiform writings, and he knows that this is something special. Finkel's department at the British Museum includes over 130,000 of these clay cuneiform tablets, most of which were unearthed in 1852 in Iraq.
Ancient Mesopotamians used cuneiform essentially to kind of keep track of things like provisioning, how many ducks were needed for a feast, things like that.
But they also wrote down at least one exciting historical tale, one of my favorites, the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The poem recounts the exploits of King Gilgamesh, who ruled in ancient Mesopotamia, an area near modern-day Iraq.
The story begins with a great flood that is sent by the gods that basically wipes out everything.
Most scholars believe that the Epic of Gilgamesh was written between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, and it plays out almost identically to the story of Noah's Ark. But it's important to remember that this story was written 1,000, if not more, years before the story of Noah's Ark. So the big question that we have is, was there one original event, or were there lots of different floods or different flood stories?
In the Epic of Gilgamesh, an immortal man by the name of Utnapishtim rounds up various animals and brings them with him into an ark. Together, they survive this catastrophic flood.
Utnapishtim's boat comes to rest on a mountain called Mount Nemush. And this story is so similar to the story of Noah's Ark that many scholars believe that the story of Noah's Ark is a direct descendant of the story of Utnapishtim and the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Ultimately, we have to think, what is the point of this story? Why do so many different cultures tell different variants of this kind of flood story? Because it makes the same point, all of them. It tells us that, again, as a species, what we do best is survive.
I'm pretty sure that at many points in history, a group of human beings put their heads together and figured out a way to endure a massive flood. It happened in 2004 in Indonesia. It happened in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And it certainly happened 5,000 years ago, inspiring a story that we still tell to this day.
I got so caught up in the Noah's Ark narrative, I almost took you to see an actual replica of the ark that was built to biblical specifications. Did you know that at a cost of like $100 million, the largest wood boat in the world is sitting at a place called the Ark Encounter? If I would have been researching how Noah built the ark, we would be on our way to Kentucky. Rather than focusing on Noah's neighborhood, the architecture of the ark, its final resting place, or even if the flood was a fairy tale, I want to take you on a trip to see an ancient artifact that came from biblical Iraq. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it is housed in a fascinating place, far from where it was discovered. So this will need to be our road trip. Since the 1800s, archaeologists from England have been digging for, discovering, and ultimately delivering artifacts from biblical Iraq to the British Museum in London. I decided that looking for pictures online of these artifacts would not do justice to the journey that I took to biblical Iraq, so I added a quick trip with my trusty camera to see some of those fantastic finds. Standing in front of the massive British Museum in London was pretty amazing. To think that I was about to be face to face with some of the most important artifacts in the world gave me goosebumps. However, walking inside of the world's largest history museum with 8 million items was a bit overwhelming. As I walked along looking at artifacts from ancient Mesopotamia, biblical Iraq, I started having sensory overload. It felt like I entered Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, having walked through a huge door and standing in front of a Disneyland of desserts. It seemed that every pot, picture, stone, statue, and tablet had meaning. I was trying my best to decide what dessert to devour. After a while, I finally came across the treat I was looking for. The Library of Ashurbanipal is the name given to a collection of over 30,000 clay tablets and fragments inscribed with cuneiform, a type of writing first created by the Sumerians and used in biblical Iraq.
This is the line that says, I am Kurash, Shar Kishati, king of the world, the great king, king of Babylon, and so it goes on. So we're going to write Kurash. So the first sign, Ku, has a big vertical, 2 small horizontals, one bigger horizontal, a little vertical, and another horizontal, like a box. This is Ku. Then Ra, we have 3 strong horizontals to begin, one big one next to it, and then one little vertical wedge, and one bigger vertical wedge. Ku, Ra. Now we do Ash, which is 3 long horizontals, Komsa, and then a vertical in the middle. So we can read this, Ku, Ra, Ash, the name of Cyrus.
The tablets were discovered in the ruins of the city of Nineveh, once the capital of the Assyrian Empire, ruled by Ashurbanipal from 669 to 631 BC.